welcome to Chapter 4, Prenatal Development and Birth. What will you learn in this chapter? Well, you will learn why most zygotes never become babies. Are home births ever best? What can a pregnant woman do to ensure a healthy newborn? Why do new mothers and fathers sometimes become severely depressed? All right, we'll start with prenatal growth. There are three main periods of prenatal development. The first is the germinal period. This is the first 2 weeks of prenatal development after conception, characterized by rapid cell division and the beginning of cell differentiation. Implantation begins within 10 days after conception. The developing organism burrows into the uterus, where it is protected and nourished. The next period is the embryonic period. This is the stage of prenatal development from approximately the 3rd through the 8th week after conception, during which the basic forms of all body structures, including internal organs, develop. Next is the fetal period. This is the stage of prenatal development from the 9th week after conception all the way until birth, during which the fetus gains about 7 pounds, more than 3,000 grams, and organs become more mature, gradually able to function on their own. Can you define these terms related to timing and technology? Beginning of pregnancy begins at conception. Length of pregnancy is the full-term pregnancies last 266 days or 38 weeks or 9 months. Trimesters, as you might imagine, are 3 sections of the full 9-month period, 3 months each, and the due date. Rarely are children born on expected due dates. Now we'll discuss vulnerability during prenatal development. The germinal period, as we discussed, lasts the first 14 days. About half of all conceptions fail to grow or implant properly and thus do not survive the germinal period. Most of these organisms are grossly abnormal. In the embryonic period, from the 3rd through the 8th week, about 20% of all embryos are aborted spontaneously, most often because of chromosomal abnormalities. Continuing on with the fetal period, from the 9th week until birth, about 5% of all fetuses are aborted spontaneously before viability at 22 weeks or are stillborn, defined as born dead after 22 weeks. And even at birth, about 31% of all zygotes grow and survive to become living newborn babies. It's a lot to go through to be successful. All right, we're going to dive a little bit more into the germinal period here, the first 14 days. The number of cells increases rapidly as the organism prepares for implantation, which occurs successfully about 1/2 of the time. Then is the development of the placenta. This is the organ that surrounds the developing embryo and is attached to the wall of the uterus. It sustains life via the umbilical cord. This nourishes the organism and carries waste products away. Next is implantation. This is about 10 days after conception. The developing organism burrows into the placenta that lines the uterus. Next, the organism grows rapidly. Pregnancy can be detected due to the chemicals in the mother's urine. The most dangerous journey. In the first 10 days after conception, the organism does not increase in size because it is not yet nourished by the mother. All right, we're in the embryonic period here. Again, that's the 3rd through the 8th week. As the embryo develops, the primitive streak becomes the neural tube that later forms the brain and spine of this central nervous system. During this time, the head takes shape, the eyes, ears, nose, and mouth form, and the heart begins to pulsate. Also, extremities develop, and webbed fingers and toes separate. Alright, here's a close-up of the embryonic period here. The picture on the left, at 4 weeks past conception, the embryo is only about 1/8 of an inch, 3 millimeters long, but already has the head. And the next picture shows by 7 weeks, the organism is somewhat less than an inch, about 2.5 centimeters long. The eyes, nose, digestive system, and even the first stage of toe formation can be seen. All right, fetus from the 9th week until birth. The 3rd month, rapid growth with considerable variation. And on average, 3 months, 3 ounces, 3 inches in terms of size and weight. During the 9th week, the SRY gene triggers development of sex organs. And at the 3rd month, neurological sex differences begin. By the end of the 3rd month, the sex organs are visible via ultrasound, also called sonogram, which is similar to an X-ray but uses sound waves instead of radiation. Alright, now we're moving on to the middle 3 months. During this time, the digestive and excretory systems develop. Fingernails, toenails, and buds for teeth form, and hair grows, including eyelashes. A fetus, just about at the age of viability, is shown fingering his or her ear. Such gestures are probably random, but yes, the baby can hear. Alright, continuing on the middle 3 months here. At the age of viability, this is the age at which a preterm newborn can survive outside the mother's uterus if medical care is available. This occurs about 22 weeks after conception. The brain is able to regulate body functions such as breathing. Even with advanced medical care, survival of extremely preterm newborns is in doubt. The data comes from 1,000 births in Sweden, where prenatal care is free and easily obtained. As you can see, the age of viability at 22 weeks means only that an infant might survive, not that it will. By full term, the survival rate is about 100%. All right, moving on to the brain. During this middle 3 months, the brain experiences rapid growth. The brain grows up to 500,000 brain cells per minute, which are created at peak growth during mid-pregnancy. This follows the proximodistal sequence from brainstem to midbrain to cortex. It develops many new neurons, neurogenesis, and synapses, synaptogenesis. And it begins to regulate basic bodily functions as the entire central nervous system becomes responsive. All right, prenatal growth of the brain here, a little bit close up in review. Just 25 days after the conception, the central nervous system is already evident. The brain looks distinctly human by day 100. That is the 3rd picture on the right at the top row. And by the 28th week of gestation, picture E, the various sections of the brain are recognizable. When the fetus is in full term, the final picture, all the parts of the brain, including the cortex, the outer layers, are formed, folding over one another and becoming more convoluted or wrinkled as the number of brain cells increases. All right. One of the tiniest, Rumesa Rahman, was born after 26 weeks and 6 days, weighing only 8.6 ounces, or 244 grams. She has a good chance of living a full normal life. And this is for the little picture on the left there. Rumesa gained 5 pounds in the hospital and then 6 months after her birth went home. Her twin sister, Heba, who weighed 1.3 pounds at birth, had gone home 2 months earlier. After their 1-year birthday, the twins seemed normal, with Rumesa weighing 15 pounds and Heba weighing 17 pounds. All right, discussing the last 3 months of development. This includes the expansion of and the contraction of lungs. It includes the final maturation of heart valves, arteries, and veins, and provides time for extensive growth and folding in the cortex. All right, moving on to birth. The fetal brain signals the release of hormones to trigger the female's uterine muscles. Labor begins, and on average, the duration for the firstborn babies is 12 hours, and this can go quicker for later born babies. Birthing positions can vary, can occur sitting, squatting, lying down, and underwater. There are cultural and personal preferences. Some cultures would prefer to do births underwater, some not. All right, an example of a normal uncomplicated birth. In the first picture, the baby's position as the birth process begins. The first stage of labor for the picture right next to it, B. The cervix dilates and allows passage of the baby's head. In the third picture, this is transition. The baby's head moves into the birth canal, the vagina. Picture D, this is the second stage of labor. The baby's head moves through the opening of the vagina, crowns, and then in picture E, emerges completely, followed by the rest of the body about a minute later. In the final picture, the third stage of labor is the expulsion of the placenta. This usually occurs naturally, but it is crucial that the whole placenta be expelled, so birth attendants can check carefully. In some cultures, the placenta is ceremonially buried to commemorate the life-giving role it plays. All right. Choice, culture, or cohort. Why do it that way? Both of these women in these two different pictures here, in Peru on the left and in England on the right, chose methods of labor that are unusual in the United States, where birth stools and birthing pools are uncommon. However, in all three nations, most births occur in hospitals. This was a rare choice just 100 years ago. A newborn's first minutes. The reflexes have developed. They usually cry spontaneously. Color changes from bluish to pinkish. Their eyes open and fingers grab and toes stretch. Newborn mortality is 1 in 250 in the United States. They use something called the Apgar scale. This is a quick assessment of a newborn's heart rate, breathing, muscle tone, color, and reflexes. It is completed twice, at the 1-minute mark and 5 minutes after birth. There's a score involved of 0, 1, or 2 in each category. The desired score is 7 or above. And to make that scoring make sense, here is their scale. You can see the scores on the left. Then each vertical column represents the different aspects and the associated scores. You can see why 7 is a good score to have. All right, sometimes medical assistance is necessary. Characteristics of childbirth depend on several variables, including support and encouragement during labor. This involves the father or other relatives, a doula who is trained and dedicated to helping mothers in the entire birth process. A doula provides massage, encouragement, information, and reassurance, all of which relieve stress. Some people use a midwife or hopefully a medical professional. Sometimes medical assistance comes in the form of surgery. a cesarean or C-section specifically. A cesarean section or C-section is a surgical birth in which incisions through the mother's abdomen and uterus allow the fetus to be removed quickly instead of being delivered through the vagina. C-sections are controversial. They vary by rates and reasons for use. Cesareans are easier to schedule, they are quicker, and bring more income to hospitals and doctors. They require surgeons, anesthesiologists, and several hospital days. There are more complications after birth, and there is less beneficial bacteria in the microbiome. The C-section rate, medically indicated about 15% worldwide. The rates vary. In China it's 50%, in the US it's 34%. Drugs are usually a part of the US birth process. One is called the epidural. It's involved in induced labor. There's the epidural, and then there's also something called Pitocin, and that induces labor. Newborn survival. About 1 in 70 die worldwide, higher in poorer nations. About 1 in 250 die in the US. 40 nations have a better rate than the United States. You can see that in the scale on the right on the slide. It's kind of interesting to see where some of these nations are. Maternal mortality in developed nations is very low, about 1 birth in 10,000. And almost always the mother is ill before birth. These rates are much better than in poor nations, where birth itself can still be hazardous. Prenatal care makes a difference. The United States is the only nation here that does not provide free prenatal care for everyone. And then looking at this scale here, I had an interesting thought. Just kind of looking at all of them, and I'm like, well, why did Germany start out so bad and improve so quickly to become one of the best nations to have a child in? I have a guess for that. I think it is because Germany was united with its eastern half at about the time this scale was created, and perhaps services were not up to par in East Germany, and so it dragged down the national rate until hospitals and services could be brought into then current standards. That's my guess. Not really sure on that. And that includes the part 1 of chapter 4.